That's the only thing I ever see is occasional, some sort of bike event
Mhm. Yeah.
in my area.
Until a few years ago, the local fair used to shut down the city's main avenue for two
Uh,
weeks straight.
2 weeks. Whew.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it was the place that you had to the road that you had to go that you came through when you came back from the beach. You had to
Good
take a
evening, everybody.
detour
We're here talking races
about
and comic books, it
and
seems,
traffic problems with
and
traffic
traffic problems
and
due to
detours.
races. It all started with Mark Evaniers' blog, so it relates back to comics, where he was talking about. See, he somehow got onto the F1 race in Las Vegas. That's what started on this. That
Mhm.
started us down this path before the show started. We're always talking about stuff before the show.
So now you get to see a little bit behind the scenes of what we talk about.
Mhm.
Stuff before the show.
If you thought we talked nonsense during the show, we talk just as much nonsense before the show.
That's right. It's the time. It's that time of day when our
Oh yeah.
brains don't function.
Good evening, sleepy reader.
Yeah, I mean, Damien's okay. It's only what noon where is that?
He's
Or
not
when
sleepy like Paolo.
1 p.m. Yeah.
By the way, Sleepy, Masked Panther is back on YouTube on another channel called Masked Panther. I don't know if you know that or not. He messaged me on Facebook and was like, "Yes, I'm going to make videos again." He's a small YouTuber who I know Sleepy and I both follow.
Oh,
He's been
okay.
around for years and years, but he comes and goes kind of.
Hmm.
And he's backing. I don't know why he must have shut down his old channel because all of a sudden he sent me a link and it was to a new. I'm like, oh, I'm not subscribed to this.
Hmm.
He was talking about One Piece. Any of you guys ever read One Piece?
I have not
Uh,
read the comic book, but I have watched the live action show,
a lot
and
of
I've enjoyed
people,
it.
yeah, a lot of people do cosplay with One Piece characters around here.
3 p.m. A lot of one. I read. Do you remember? Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, I thought you might not know that because it's a new channel called Masked Panther. I just subscribed to it. Good evening, Mind the Comics. Yeah, I only read One Piece. Do you remember when Shonen Jump started here, Wilson? Did you ever get that?
Yes, yes.
Um, I don't remember when was it. It was either the late '90s or the early 2000s. I can't even remember.
I want to
Shonen
say
Jump.
late '90s.
Yeah, it's now an app. You can get it for $3 a month as an app, which isn't bad. Well, it was an attempt to bring Japanese style, like I get because the way I'm told comics are published in Japan is they come out weekly in this big black and white anthology. And
Hmm.
then when they're done in that, they put them in the book.
Yep.
So, then One Piece is being published in, 8-page segments or something. And then in a weekly anthology. And then when it's all done, is published in a book. So they tried to bring that over here as a magazine called Shonen Jump. And it was thick. It was, a few hundred pages of black and white Japanese comics. And I remember getting a subscription because you get a subscription to it. And these are the days when subscriptions were cheap, like $1 an issue. So it was like $12 or $14 for a year, 12 issues worth of Shonen Jump, which I got for, I think I got it for a year. But just the sheer volume of it made me go, you know what? I got no place to put all these. I mean, sure, they were cheap at $1, but at the end of the year, you had this much
Yeah,
shelf space worth of books that I was never going to read again.
you're not actually supposed to keep the phone
Yeah, I
books.
know.
You
Yeah,
you read the phone books to figure out which strips you like, and then you
right.
buy the collections of the strips you like.
I remember one guy we worked with. You don't even do that. Julio, who we worked with at Marvel, he moved to Japan. He's back now, but he moved to Japan for a few years. And he said the way they did it there was they had lots of used comic book stores. And what you did was you went in and bought 10 volumes of whatever comics you wanted to read. And then when you were done reading them, you sold them back to the store. He said that's what everybody, except Julio, he bought them and kept them. I assume he brought them back with him to the States eventually. But he's like, yeah, that's what everybody does here. They buy the volumes they want to read. They read them, and then they sell them back to the store. I found that interesting. I was like, huh. But yeah, nobody, obviously, I mean, there were, an inch thick each volume. So at least. So there was a lot of comics in there. But that's the only time I read One Piece is in those first, 12 issues of Shonen Jump.
Yeah, the
Isn't
French
One
used
Piece the most successful manga of all time? It might be.
either that or Berserk.
Yeah, I know when it comes out, when like a new volume comes out, it sells 2 or 3 million copies.
Yeah, they started in the 90s and they're still publishing.
What was that?
They started in the 90s and they're still publishing those books.
Yeah. Hola. Throwing things away goes against the comics collector's DNA, Paolo. It sure does.
Exactly. But it's not compatible with Japanese publishing plans.
Yes.
The French used to have magazines. What they did was they would publish 1 or 2 pages of the album per week.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end of the year, you had an album there in hardcover in big. But the French magazines were smaller, 32 pages a week. Not like Metal Hurlant. Heavy metal is high quality even by French standards.
Yeah, so Shonen Jump, I know I saw it when it first started, but I didn't subscribe. Shonen Jump is now an app you can get on the iPad or whatever. And it's like $3 a month, and you can read a lot of manga through it. I forget how much. I think they release a certain amount each month, but they also have a library of stuff you can read. So if you want to read a lot of manga digitally for $3 a month, Shonen Jump.
Yeah, but that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to keep the library, not like what Marvel does. Okay, now we're going to take out all of the Werewolf by Nights because.
And Comixology is now gone. I just saw that this week.
They'll be completely gone. So you have to read your books through the Amazon app, through
Kindle
app, and it's supposed to work the same way. But who knows? Yeah. I've been dealing with the Marvel, trying to read the comics on Marvel's site, and it's just such a pain to get to a portion to even read it. I was able to occasionally read it on the computer, which I prefer to, but they keep wanting you to go to the app, and I don't want to go to the app. I don't want to read it on my phone. I can read it on my iPad. It looks fine on the iPad. The problem is it keeps wanting you to like subscribe to the app. It's like I don't want to do that.
And you've got a smaller iPad, right? Don't you have an iPad?
Yeah, I have an iPad. I use an iPad Mini.
So you're better off on the computer.
Right. And I prefer it on the computer. I find it just a slightly bit easier to navigate on the computer. Once you can figure out how to get to the portion of the computer to read it, because it just wants you to do it just on the app. And the app is not made for the computer. So it's this kind of a fight back and forth with the computer where it's like you should be able to log on, click on the book you want to read, and go ahead and read it. But it just does everything it can to make you so frustrated that you just walk away from it altogether. And it's like, because I bought the comic, I bought the comic. The comic comes with the code. The digital code, right? And it's easy to put the digital code on the computer. I could do a stack of books all at once, and then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm done. Let me start reading these particular books. I bought these books. Let me get access to it. And it is not easy to navigate.
Wow.
I think
Paolo's answering questions in the chat. Was Metal Hurlant weekly? Went through periods of monthly, bi-monthly, and quarterly. Tintin, Pief, Pilote, and Spirou were weekly. Marvel on the iPad app is great and costs very little. Okay. But he's got the iPad mini. That's why he's not a huge fan of the. I actually.
I like it on the iPad mini. It doesn't bother me. It's more of the navigation. Because with Comixology, it used to be you just opened it up and went right to your library and you just started reading within two, maybe 3 buttons. And that's it. With the Marvel one, I find that you go to the library, and it's not really listed in any, like, you can't really control your library. It just gives you a list of books, and then you got to go through the whole list to find which titles that you have. Like, I have an okay run of Spider-Man books, so I want to read those books, and and it comes to the point where it's like I had to read it on the phone because I had taken a trip to the eye doctor. And anytime you go to the doctor's office, you're sitting there for 20 good minutes before you even see the first person. And so I want to read something. And so I re-downloaded the app and I'm trying to read it on the phone. And to me, it's just not easy. It took a bunch of different buttons going through to find something to be able to read. I ended up reading some Christmas specials because that was just the quickest thing that was available to read. And it was good. But it was a 2006 Christmas special.
Wasn't what you were looking for?
It wasn't what I was looking for, but at least I knew those are like 50-page giants. Right. So I get at least 4 stories to kind of read. And there was a fun one with Fing Fang Foom and Wong, because apparently Fing Fang Foom can control his size. So at this one Christmas, he's walking around Chinatown like the Thing with a big overcoat. But he's about the size of the Thing.
Right.
Where he's like, he could hide in an overcoat, but that's a dragon walking down the street.
I actually was checking the Kindle app today just because, like I said, they sent me an email saying Comixology is going away, but we moved all the Comixology content to Kindle. So I was checking to see that they did, because the one thing I remembered I have on Comixology was one day, I can't remember, a couple of years ago, they gave away all of the Black Panther comics.
Yep. I downloaded every single one of those series, myself.
Every single issue. They're just like, here, have some free Black Panther comics. So I spent the time to click on each one and get each. So I was like, oh, my Black Panther comics here? And sure enough, they were.
Okay.
Usually every December, on the Kindle, there's a sale on Marvel collected editions. And I occasionally buy some stuff there just for the heck of it, where they have like Marvel Masterworks, the digital version, for like $3. And like an epic trade paperback, one of the big ones, for like, $5. So it's like you can buy, So it's like I bought the first 5 volumes of Marvel Team Up, I think it was, last year, for like $2 or $3 a piece. I'm like, you know what? I'll buy them at that price. I always like those. I've not looked at them. I buy them just kind of to have them, not to. I don't need. I bought one issue of Marvel Team Up, one of the Man Thing one of my favorites. So just because, so that there's like one single issue of Marvel Team Up in my Kindle collection. Let's see. Oh, didn't realize you were using digital codes. Yeah, he uses digital. So a TV program from 10 years ago about Portuguese around the world, and one of them was in Japan, with a comic book clerk that started their chain of manga shops and sold 8 million a month. Damn. I wonder if anyone but me uses the Dark Horse app. Oh, I don't think I use that. It still works and has been around since before Comixology. Wow.
I'm almost sure I have. Or I
had
the
downloaded it sometime.
Yeah. There's been at least 3 comic book apps before Comixology.
Yeah.
Where it was like some of the books were the Golden Age copyright free books.
Right.
So I've had those. I've had a bunch of those over the years where it's like, all right, these are some free books. and I would read them that way. But again, it's the navigation of it. That one was cool only because you could kind of put your books into different little libraries and go, these are the Westerns, these are the superheroes. So they kind of gave you a virtual bookshelf to put your books on and kind of display. And I thought that was pretty neat to look at on the device. And some of them, you could click on it and it'll tell you a little bit of the history of it. And I thought that was a pretty cool way to do it. But I couldn't even tell you the name of it because I don't even remember the app. A lot of them came and went.
I still bootleg the digital versions of the comics I actually buy. It's like whatever comic I buy, I'm like, it should come with a digital version. So I go on and I bootleg the digital version and put it in a folder. It's like I never even look at it. I never read it. I just kind of hoard it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the reality of downloading. You download it because it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I downloaded it because I just spent $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 on a comic book. I think it should come with the digital version too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree that the files exist. They're there. Yeah. I helped create the system that Marvel ran on. So, I know they exist.
Marvel, they give you a digital version. So
yeah.
Most of the stuff I buy is indie, so there's no digital version for me that comes with the book.
Right.
Sorry, I went back to check that number. Not million, but billion. 8 billion.
Well, it's a chain, yeah. No, when the Japanese licensed to other countries, a few years ago they used to demand ridiculously high sales volumes. And that's why we didn't have manga in Portugal, in Portuguese. They wanted 50,000 guaranteed sales for a volume. 50,000. 50,000 would put you ahead of every major week daily newspaper, except for one, and above the third biggest, highest selling sports paper. So, comic books are niche publishing.
Yeah, not in Japan, but everywhere else.
Not in Japan.
The art supply of the week that I got is little glass jars. And I'm surprised I found these exact jars because I've been using where's one? I take my big bottle of ink and I put it in a little bottle of ink. And I've been using the same jars since the 80s, the late 80s. And I would get fabric paint would come in these jars. And when I was done with the fabric paint, I was like, nice jar. I should keep some of those around. So I kept some around. And I eventually, like for 30 years now, I've been using the same jar to put ink in. And I just bought so many different brands of ink recently. I'm like, I need some more jars. And I couldn't find where I put any. I'm like, did I get rid of the other jars? Because I've had them just lying around the place for decades.
Right.
So I looked online and I was like, I think these are the same exact jars. That's what and it turns out these are jars that go with airbrushes. Now, I've had airbrushes before, but I've never had an airbrush that fits one of these jars, where you put the paint in the jar, and then this screws right into your airbrush. And it sprays the paint right out of the jar. And then when you're done, you put your paint away. But I was like, oh, I'm like reading the description of it. I'm measuring my jars. I'm looking at the measurements of those jars, because you never know, because you can't always tell from the picture.
Right.
I'm like, I think that's it, because I always thought these were 1 ounce jars, but they're 3/4 ounce jars. But that was my art supply of the week. I ended up getting a dozen little glass jars from
A
Ex
dozen.
Duvet. I don't know what that word is. Ex Duvet?
Next of it.
Ex Duvet?
Maybe
Who knows?
10 of it.
10 Dovet. Baker's dozen Dovet. What do you put your ink in, Wilson? Do you use ink anymore?
I keep my ink in the original FW jar.
Okay.
And I just refill it.
Okay. See,
So
I've never liked those because I can't see into it that well, and the neck is too narrow.
Huh. It never really bothered me. I've always used it out of this jar, and I kind of mix my own ink.
Okay.
So it's a combination of Pelican, FW, and then occasionally, depending on if I had it, was like the Stadler Mars ink, and I would mix all three together, let it dry a little bit to thicken up, and then went from there. I don't know if that was the combination that Harry Candelario taught me years ago, because I've worked with so many inkers and got little information from each one of them. I think Harry used to say he would put a drop of ammonia in it to really dry it out a bit. But over the years, I would play around with it just to see how can I get a nice rich black from when I'm inking.
Interesting. See, if I were doing that, I'd mix it up in a big batch.
Right. I tend to have mixed it up as I went along because I don't ink that much.
Right.
Back then, I would be doing like assistant to other inkers. So maybe 3 pages here of backgrounds. I would be using technical pens a lot more than brushing. So the brushing was mainly to fill in the blacks. And then when I was inking my own stuff, it depended on the project. I think my first Ninja Mouse book was mostly ink and Sharpie because that was a 24-hour comic. So it was just to go quickly. But since then, whenever I'm doing traditional art, it's usually I might mix up before the project starts, and it lasts me at least 2 books, maybe 3 books before I would have to whip up a new batch.
Okay. I'm always topping off my ink bottle so I can see myself dip into it. The manga chain was called Mandarake.
Mandarake.
Mandarake?
Mandarake. You have to pronounce it like in
an
anime.
The magician?
Yeah, I'm thinking Mandrake the magician from King Features.
It's but that's how you'd pronounce it in Japanese. Mandarake.
Okay.
Oh. And his assistant, Rotaro.
And what I was doing with my ink today, which really tired me out, last weekend, I was working on one of my Gatsby illustrations, and I drew it, ink on paper, scanned it in, and was coloring it in Adobe Illustrator. And you remember the textures I did? I showed you guys a couple weeks ago when I made a whole bunch of textures that I scanned in and used in Adobe. I did something, and I said to myself, one of the things you can do in Illustrator is you can make sort of brush strokes, they're called, where you can take any piece of art and make it into a brush stroke. I.e., you can make any shape you want and turn it into an Illustrator brushstroke. So I said, you know what? I need something that looks like a sort of jagged brushstroke here. Let me see what's in Illustrator. And I tried a couple of the Illustrator ones and was like, I don't like any. Then once again, I said to myself, let's see what Illustrator brushstrokes they had for sale. And then I looked at them. I said, what am I doing? I've been making brush strokes on paper for 30 years. So I got another one of these book, and I spent like last Saturday, and then today I did this other side. I did this side last weekend of long brush strokes. There we go. Then I did a whole bunch of short brush strokes today. So I filled up 34 pages with these short ink brush strokes, and then scanned them all in, and can turn them into now I can use them all in Adobe Illustrator. But doing the big long ones took a lot less time than doing all these small ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever made your own brushes in something.
I made them in
the easiest thing to make your own brushes in.
I made them in Photoshop. I made my own Photoshop brushes over the years. I've collected Photoshop brushes from other people, and so some are cool to try out. I have some stables, and then one time I had to make one up on the fly because I had to make something look like hay, and it was just easier to just like kind of make these curved brushes. I made a pattern out of them, made a brush out of that pattern, and then basically using it almost like the way I would color something, I made a haystack on the floor of a barn.
In Photoshop, there are sort of easy brushes and hard brushes to make.
Right.
The easy brushes are like the old ones that have been around, that are mostly they're just stamps that repeat. The harder brushes to make are the ones where you can add opacity to this part tint a little more. I've never made those brushes because they take a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
But like with Illustrator, with these brushes, it's fairly simple. Because you make like one of these big long lines into a brush, and then it just draws with that line. So it stretches out that line. It'll stretch out one of these lines, or it'll crimp it up depending on how long the brush stroke you're making is. So it's a lot easier in Illustrator to make brushes that are kind of usable in Illustrator. So now I have to actually do something. Oh, I did all this because I needed one brush. I ended up doing all this. So sometimes, so sort of, I worked all day on making these little ones and scanning them in. Then at the end of the day, I was just kind of like, I crashed. I was just like, now I'm tired, and what am I going to do with these? I don't know. So now I have to figure out something to do with them. Look at that. I mean, I have so many brushes. That I was like, why am I thinking of buying these when I can obviously make endless ones of my own?
Because if you bought them, you would have been finished with art today instead of being exhausted at the end of the day.
But I wouldn't have had all these. It would have taken me just as long to find one that I needed, and it would have cost me even more money. That's the problem with when you buy, which I would do for Procreate or Photoshop, because it's just easier to buy brushes for that than to make them.
Right.
But you buy like 500 brushes for $40, and then you got to find the 4 you like. That's what takes the most time.
True. Very true.
Paolo answering questions again in the... Your Japanese is excellent, Paolo. I learned from reading sushi menu restaurants.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't supposed to learn any Japanese. Otherwise, I just know it. I've actually learned a few things. I know where to find the spec sheet page on Japanese car websites. I memorized the kanji.
That kanji. Bum, bum, bum. Want to see I have to show you this comic I got this week because it came in the mail. Do you remember that book that I got the 5 covers of because I was one of the first 200 subscribers? And the second issue I said never came? Well, the second issue finally came. Of The Sickness. by, who is it? Jenny Cha is the art. And then the story and script, Jenny Cha and Lonnie Nadler. Letters, good old Hassan Atzmain El How. And this is a Jenny Cha cover, I think. But this came to the comic shops 2 months ago. I thought it was never showing up. I pretty much, I was like, oh, guess I'm never going to see any issues of that book. But after the day after I got this, they sent out an email that said they're not they now outsourced their subscriptions to a very reliable company. So their whole plan was to get the issue to subscribers before it got to the comic shop. Obviously, that plan didn't work. But they're like, now with issue, you should get issue 3 is at the printers, so you should get that pretty quickly, and everything should be fine. I'm like, oh, good. But this is a rare black and white book. Here, let me show you the artwork up close. And I'd call this is a particular type of artwork, which I don't think is particularly well drawn, but has a lot of rendering in it. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I mean, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I like it. But it's like I said, I don't think it's particularly well drawn. But oh my goodness, does she do rendering? Just tons of little lines. And the story is really weird. Here is the description of it on the back. If you're feeling sick, the man may be following you. 1945, the year. With the war escalating, Daniel's hallucinations grow more disturbing by the day. The man is getting closer, further. The man, whoever that is getting closer, further exacerbating the boy's symptoms. But Daniel just wants to be normal and so insists on facing these horrors alone. That's one thread of the story. The other thread of the story is 1955. George's obsession with the housewife who murdered her family consumes him. He refuses to sweep the tragedy under the rug, determined to prevent future suffering by searching for answers in the past. Now you know as much as I do. Because even in reading this, it's just so, because like, it switches between, here's the 1945 timeline, and it's just these two high school kids living their life. And the one high school kid, as they're living their life, starts to have these crazy hallucinations. But there's no explanation for anything. There's no, as far as I can tell, it's slice of life with horror in the background. And then we switch to 1955 and this guy researching stuff. And if it wasn't for this description on the back telling me what was going on in 1955, I wasn't quite getting it. But it's about this doctor is researching some cases of schizophrenia and what happened to the people. And they were given lobotomies is what happened to them. And he's like, oh my God, lobotomies in 1955. This is so barbaric. And like, there's one of the, so it's like, so his story is just sort of his slice of life investigating stuff. I'm not quite sure how the two stories relate, except the kid in 1945 might have, who knows, might have schizophrenia because he's seeing things. Except at one point, here's the man they mentioned. He's in this theater in the background, and he just kind of flicks his finger, and like horrors occur on screen, and people turn into zombies. And I think that's the kid's hallucination. Yeah, that's the kid's hallucination. I don't know how it all relates at all. I'm enjoying it, but I couldn't. Besides this nice description they gave us in the back, I don't really know what's going. I don't know how this all ties together. It looks and sounds very old school indie. Yeah, it is. This is
It kind of reminds me of early Doug Braithwaite.
Yeah, it's definitely what the kayfabe would call outlaw art.
Yeah, but the thing it doesn't. I don't think it's outlaw. I mean, I think that
no, not quite.
I think she could make it in a superhero comic, but
I don't think her drawing is quite good enough for. It's not the same time. But then she does something like this panel right here, which is quite well drawn.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it is? It's the fabric. It's the clothes and the fabric she doesn't really have down. But it's not like it's not. She's obviously talented.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the black and white definitely makes it look old school indie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she just needs a good editor, and a Fabian Nicieza. If you didn't understand a thing, that's because you needed a Fabian Nicieza to write the dialogues.
Oh, I understood it on a micro level. I didn't understand it on the macro level, kind of thing. It's like you could tell in general what was going on. These two kids were living their life while the one kid was having hallucinations. And there was something shady that went on in this old schizophrenia case and a woman who murdered her family. And this doctor's trying to figure out what. But how it all relates to anything is what I don't know. So like I said, on a micro level, it makes sense. It's not like I'm confused reading it from panel to panel. Mm-hmm. I'm confused why it exists, sort of thing. It's but it gives a really, much like their last book, which I can't remember, which took place in the Canadian wilderness in like the late 1800s. There's just a creepiness factor they have too. There's just a really, really creepy vibe going on. But what the overall story means, I don't know. But I don't think I knew what their last overall story meant. It was just really weird and creepy and interesting.
So it's a black and white comic book. How many pages?
Oh, it's a good. I think it's 32 pages. Let me count. And it's comic from beginning to end. There's no filler. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 32 pages. From beginning, it's 32 pages of comic from beginning to end.
Right.
So.
And you have that as a mail order subscription,
yes.
Or it was just a special you bought for one shot?
It was this $6 an issue charges, but I bought. It was like 3 months ago now.
I do remember a bit about it.
I spent. I think it's like it might be a 5-issue series, and I paid $30 for the subscription. And if you were among the first 200 people to subscribe, they were going to send you all 5 covers for the first issue, which is what I did. I was like, you know what? I'll give it a try I'll risk $30 just to. And I got those ones, and then this one came out. I don't know, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, sometime. I saw an issue of it in the comic shop. I'm like, oh, my issue must be coming to my subscription soon.
Right.
8 weeks later, it finally shows up. Like I said, they said the third one should be coming. I think it was, from what I could tell from when I got the first issues in an email about that, it was like the writer and artist mailing out the subscriptions. And I was just like, I don't know if that's going to work. I think they got more stuff to do, which is why Uncivilized Books now outsourced it. But yeah, fun.
Because the reason why I asked is because I was on my way back from the comic book shop today, and I was on the train and I was reading one of the comics, and it got me thinking about the fact that I I never really had a comic book subscription.
No?
I've had subscriptions to magazines.
Right.
And I kind of just never got it for comics because I did like the act of going to the shop every week and picking up the books, even though when you read the old ads, it was less expensive to order to get a subscription. But I didn't like the idea of them. You didn't know what you were going to get in the mail, because I remember that the older Marvel ones were folded in half and sent in the mail.
They weren't by the time I was getting them. So
around the late 80s, early 90s, I might have sent like for a not a subscription, but it was like a sample comic book to see what it would be like to get comics in the mail. And I did get some Marvel comics that way, and they did come regular flattened. And it was like, okay, this looks cool. But it got me thinking today, are there still subscriptions? I don't know if Marvel does one, or is that completely outsourced to other companies?
I think they are, but I don't know if Marvel handles it.
Mm-hmm.
But I had Marvel subscriptions before the comic shop opened. And so I was probably in junior high when I had subscriptions. And I liked them because my parents used to get them for me for like Christmas.
Right.
So as a Christmas present, they'd get me a couple of subscriptions. And that also meant I didn't have to spend whatever money I earned during the year from doing chores on that comic. It's like I know I had a subscription to the Hulk. That was a thumbs up. I know I had a subscription to the Hulk, maybe Spider-Man. I had like 3, probably the most subscriptions I had was 3 or maybe 4. But like I said, what was cool about that was 3 or 4 other comics I could get.
Right.
Because I didn't have to come up with Hulk money.
Right. That, and again, thinking about it, it's like, I bought a lot of books as a kid. Where was I getting that money from? And it was like, oh yes, because it would be like, I would be the one that would be sent to the store to buy everything and anything. And so it was like, so it was embezzlement. I would keep the change, and that's how I would pick up books. Because I did chores and stuff like that and little odd jobs, especially in the summer. It was a bunch of jobs, and then I would save up my money that way. But every time my parents would send me to the store to get milk, or back then cigarettes, soda, newspapers, I would pick up, because the books were 50 cents. So it would be like a comic would come home with me. It's like, that's how I was getting my fix of books.
See, my mother had a system where we would do chores and get nickels.
Okay.
It was like, this chore is, do this chore, you get a nickel, do this chore, you get a dime, do this chore, you get 3, whatever it was. And we could also save up our money. We had calendar money, it was called. My mother would write down on the calendar how much money we earned for doing whatever. So you could save it up if you wanted something that cost $5.
Right.
But, I would use those nickels to buy comics.
Right.
Which were, 30, 35, probably 25, 30 cents at the time. So getting a nickel was a good chunk of a comic.
Yeah.
I always ask subscriptions at birthdays, and yeah. But the subscription copies were always much later than the newsstand appearance. They weren't when I was getting them in the late 70s. I think I actually used to get them around the same time, if not a couple days earlier. If they came late, I'd get really nervous. Matter of fact, I was missing, what was it? Hulk 237 for years because it never showed up in my subscription. That was like the one hole in my Hulk collection from 200 to, whatever it was, 250, 260, wherever. But yeah, they usually came. They were mailed flat. Matter of fact, I can still remember I had no idea what now mailed flat meant.
Oh,
because
okay.
that's what in the subscription ads that one at the time I was getting them said now mailed flat. And I'm like those words didn't even make sense to me.
Mhm.
I'm like, now mailed flat. What does that even mean? Because I didn't know they folded them in half and mailed them.
Right, they would fold them lengthwise.
Right.
So they basically folded them in half this way,
Right.
and then they would be mailed. I think they would be wrapped in like a brown paper, and they would have the stamp and information on it.
The ones I got were wrapped in a piece of brown paper, but they were flat. They were flat just like this, with a piece of brown paper. That was open on both ends. So you had to be careful because it could slide right.
Because it slide out,
It didn't slide easily, but occasionally, you'd get just the mailer. You'd be like, where's my comic? And the comic might show up the next day with no mailer on it. And you're like, I guess they knew or something. But
keep that mailman happy.
Yeah, open at each end, right?
Yeah, well, the way it came folded had no relation to the way that the mailman would fold it to make it fit in the mailbox.
Then there's that. If it was raining, subcomics were wet, and of course, always folded in a brown wrapper. Yeah, like I said, I knew people whose mailman folded comic. Right.
Even to this day, buying old comics, and people always say, "Oh, you could write on it, do not bend." They don't read that. They don't have time to read that. So it's like, I've had a handful of books that were messed up because they would try to fold it up to put it into the mailbox. And it's like, I'm home. I don't go anywhere. Bring it to me.
I always, when I was selling some comics on eBay, I always went back and forth on whether I should write "do not bend" on them. Because first of all, I put them in mailers that you have to break it over your knee to bend it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? There might be some rogue mailman who takes that as a challenge. And one time I brought it into the mail, and the postman was like, "You really think I'm going to bend this? Do not bend." And I'm like, like, what? Why would you even write it down? But I had. Of all the times mailing out stuff, I had one comic get bent. And of course, the guy complained. And one of the things he complained about was he didn't even write "do not bend" on the mailer. I was like, I guess I got to write "do not bend" on all of them now, just so that's one you can't complain about. But that was the one time something got bent. Mm-hmm.
I never subscribed to any comic. I could always have the nice old rack for digest-sized comics.
Technically, I subscribe to all my comics because I have a pull list.
Right.
That's not quite what we're talking about, but I'm not paying for them in advance, and it's not from the company.
Right.
That's subscription.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, at least they stopped folding them in the pine. Yeah, exactly. They did. Like I said, but I can remember trying to figure out what now mailed flat meant. Because if you're 10 or 12 and you don't know that they mail, because all mail was flat. Envelopes were flat. So I just remember going, what does that mean? No clue. Couldn't comprehend what those words meant, all strung together. But yeah, I'm glad mine were mailed flat. I don't know if I would have gotten a subscription if they sent me folded copies.
Right, exactly. So I had no idea. And when you would read the books, or at least in the 80s when I was reading the books, they tell you about, you subscribe, you check off which books you want, and you pay for them in a year in advance and stuff like that. And I just never did it. And then to work at Marvel and hear a few stories about how Jim Shooter tells a story about how people would complain to him at cons. Is like, we send in our monies and we don't get the books. And so he tells this story where, and I didn't hear the story until I was working at Marvel, was that kids would mail in the 50 cents. They would tape it to the page, send it in, and then somebody at Marvel, one of the secretaries, would open it up, pocket the 50 cents, and didn't go through the system. And he found the person who was doing this and put a stop to it. And it was like, could you imagine? Like, I would guess parents might have been sending in a check.
Yeah, my parents.
Harder, right? Which would be harder to pocket that. But they would be kids sending in money, and it just it didn't go any further than whoever opened that envelope.
And they must have been sending in dollar bills too, because
I would imagine so.
I don't think subscriptions were 50 cents in the late 70s.
Right.
When Shooter took over.
So, and again, it was just because you read it and you're not savvy about it. You write your name, blah blah blah. You toss in a couple of bucks, and you mail it on the way. And that was during a time where sometimes you get stuff in the mail, sometimes you didn't. I only ever mailed away once for an action figure, and that was what was the magazine? Toy Fair magazine.
Okay,
was doing mail-aways. But again, it's like any other thing before that. Like I'm sure I mailed away cereal box toppers and stuff like that, and never got whatever I was mailing away for.
Well, that's why tracking numbers are such a joy now,
right?
Because it used to you just sent it out into the void, and maybe the thing you ordered would come. Because I can remember in the 90s, sending away for a few things. I can't even remember what now. Just occasionally I'd go, oh, okay, I'll get that special so-and-so. You have to spend in, 2 wrappers and this, and you just never know what's going to show up.
Yeah, and many companies were doing it. I know Oreos did one to send for a Spider-Man comic.
Mm-hmm.
AIM did it. All did it. All laundry detergent, AIM toothpaste. I eventually got those books years later in other ways, but there was, sometimes you could only get those books through a giveaway. Like I know there was a Spider-Man origin that I wanted.
Right. And I'm not even blaming the post office. This is the company not sending them, I assume.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was always like, you never know.
You just never know who at the company was doing anything. Yeah. And there was not only those, but it's like how many comic books had those big ads for the bike? Did anyone actually get that bike? Did anyone get the
who could win this 10-speed bike?
Right. This comic could be worth $10,000 or something like that with another ad. Could be.
Those ads that ruined our comics for months.
Oh yeah. And then
X-Men 137 could be a classic cover, except it's got that giant ad on top, and everybody has to actively ignore.
And did anyone win those? Did anyone win did a 7-Eleven have something going on, or they were just the cups? But I think they might have had something else going on too. Okay, because there would be events that you'd be reading about, and it's like, I don't know if anyone ever won those.
And they're always so cheap too, these events.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't like big money, You can win a 10-speed bike. Everybody had a 10-speed bike.
And again, this is a place that was selling ads for X-ray specs. So really, how legitimate was some of these things that were going on in comics? Hell, I remember. You remember Quest Probe, the comic book based on a game system? It was 3 issues published, and it was a Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Hulk, and another title. I think The Thing, and it was called Quest Probe. And you read the comic book, but it was also based on I don't know if it was a mail away game system. I don't know if it was supposed to be Stan took it.
No,
and it was it was like
What?
this
Hold on.
weird
Wasn't that a
interaction
Radio
thing.
Shack thing?
It might have been. It
Maybe
might have been
a
connected
Quest
to Radio
Probe
Shack.
sounds like might have been a Radio Shack thing.
Because I
Not
think it was
100% sure.
I think it was an early game.
Yeah.
And
Like
it might have been one of those games where you wrote in the information and the computer would spit out the next thing to do.
It was like a custom comic. It may have been like a custom comic for Radio Shack.
It might have been, but it was sold on the stands because I remember buying it.
Okay.
It was sold on the stands, but there was a tie-in with the Radio Shack game. That was also under the same name, Quest Pro. And I guess there's something interacted. I never really looked back into it. I tried to find out information because there was supposed to be 4 issues and only 3 were ever published. And I don't know if they ever made the 4th one. And it was like one of those things that was like, I was reading it because Spider-Man was in it. And it seemed like a team-up type of thing. And then never went any further. So it was like, it was kind of like, you know, some of those X-Men storylines that just dropped and we just never revisited.
Quest Probe. Let's see, another comic I got this week. The Forged, issue number, what is this, 6? I've really been enjoying this comic. I've been enjoying the magazine size and the art. Like, just seeing the art at magazine size is a lot of fun. And this was pretty much an action issue of it. The Forged are this team of military warrior. It takes. Let me see. Once again, I'll read you the description better than trying to describe it. Here we go. For centuries, all of known space has been the realm of Her Eternal Majesty the Empress. Elite teams of soldiers, the Forged, serve her with fierce loyalty and total determination. Cloned from the Empress's genetic template, these women, armed and armored with devastating weaponry and technology, are the ultimate extension of Imperial will. Forged Team Scimitar 3, composed of, there's all their names, while the team explores the luxuries to be found within the beating heart of the Empire. That's this. So it's about these this military team who serve this Empress, and they the first story arc, their first mission, which was very action oriented, they discover they travel through space in what's called T-space, some sort of hyperspace thing, where you're not actually traveling between the two long distances, you're going through T-space, they call it, to get there. And they just discovered that their first contact with an alien civilization is this alien civilization that lives in T-space. And it wrecked something of these Earthlings, stuff. So now they're worried about going to war with it. They're worried that they won't be able to use T-space, and therefore they won't be able to keep their empire together, which is, of course, on different planets, but they need T-space to travel between the planets. So in this issue, the super spy master of the Empire, some of his underlings decide to try and take out the Forged because they know too much. So the action was these, completely failures of assassins trying to take out this alien team, but just really well written, really well drawn. I just like that the art's so big. And I was thinking about even if they do like which I'm sure they are, a collected edition of this, it would have to be well bound. You'd want it to open up because it's nice to see the art as this expanse. So I would hope when they do a collected edition, they have good binding on it, because I just wouldn't want people to lose out on sort of the opening flat of this art, which is one of the reasons I like individual issues. And some books are bound well enough to do that, but there, as we all know, there's some books that are bound and they barely open, and you lose a lot of the art to the gutter loss. And I'm like, that it'd be a shame to, for this nice art in this nice big size to be ruined by gutter loss. There's a double page spread that reads across. So. But there's also world building stuff in the back. I think it's about 42 pages with other stuff, and like 42 pages of comics, and it's $6, $7, and then more world building stuff in the back that I never read.
Oh man, those
wow.
like they look like they came straight out of an RPG book.
Yeah. There's some people like this world building stuff. I do not. It just, especially when
it seems like homework.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the design of it either.
Mm. Yeah, at least Jonathan Hickman just makes some diagrams, and they're easier to read.
And like that, for people who like world building, I'm sure they like that. But I'm fine not reading it. It's perfectly fine.
Still doing
But like I've
doing
really
something.
been enjoying that series more than I thought I would. What was that?
Yeah, it was still doing something with that format and that many pages. It's a risk.
Yeah, it is. I don't know what the circulation on it is, but I hope it keeps going for a while. You're right, it is a risk because U.S. comics fans want the same format all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Even giving them a magazine size, they're like, "Whoa,
yeah."
What am I supposed to do with that? How do I keep that in mint condition?
What box do I have to buy? What bags and boards?
It doesn't fit in with the rest of my box.
They at least are making bags and boards in those sizes now.
Yeah.
I do recall, when I was collecting,
I have them.
Every now and then you would have oversized books, and it's like, I'm not sure what to do with these. The first one was the graphic novels. And it's like, okay, they're just a little bigger. They're magazine size. You can figure out something with them. Treasury editions were notorious to try to keep those in any good condition because I like to post them up. I like having the Treasury editions kind of like standing up because they were like they were posters basically of the comic books, but they would flop over and things like that. So it's like, I would have loved to have bags and boards for those way back when I did display them.
I keep the vast majority of my comics on shelves. I keep building shelves everywhere. And my shelves that are over there, I was like, all right, these are going to be my big shelves. They have to at least fit a Treasury edition. That was my size for those shelves. And then
DC came up with Wednesday comics.
No, it was the artist editions.
Okay.
But what I did was I said, okay, for the even more oversized shelves, how I built these shelves was I built them sort of like in a pyramid shape, where there's one shelf that goes out to here, and the shelf on top of it only goes to here, so that the big books can go on the very outside of the bottom shelf. And there's about 6 inches of space, since the next one is like 6 inches in on the other side, that they can stand up past that shelf that's on top of them. That's what I did on those. Then I built even more shelves to put big books on. Matter of fact, I'm about to put some shelves in this hallway back here, because this is nothing but a pass-through hallway, and I'm like, above the doorways, I can put a shelf along the length of this hallway here, which is about 8 feet, and put books on it.
Right.
It's not doing anything. It's just a pass-through hallway. It's nothing happens in there except you walk through it. I can go with some. I can put some shelves there. Building shelves is easy. That's what you got to know, especially with shelf brackets.
Right.
That's even easier.
You got to film the shelf building. How to build comic book shelves.
Dun, dun, dun. Shelf bracket. Make sure you anchor them to the wall, though.
Right.
If you're building a bookcase, you're building. If you're using the brackets, that's easy enough because they screw into the wall. So a bracket is just like that, and you screw it into the wall and lay a piece of wood on top of it. That's all it is. Shelf brackets.
So, like I mentioned, I did go to the comic book shop today.
Show us some things.
So let's show some books. Let's show the books I actually read, because I read a couple on the train.
All right.
So picking up books off the shelf just to try stuff out. So they happen to have Superman 78. So this comic book,
you so you can show it to us.
Sure. So this is a Superman comic that takes place in the Christopher Reeve's movie universe.
Okay.
And it's called The Metal Curtain. So it's the first issue. I don't know what it is, if there's an anniversary going on or something, but Superman 78 happened to be something that's going on with me. I had gotten the Mego 12-inch figure not too long ago. And then I just
your toys.
Right. So I picked it up for the toys, and then I rewatched the movie recently just for the fun of it, and I still discover some stuff with it. If you remember, the movie opens up with curtains.
Who's drawing that?
And then a comic. This is drawn by.
Looks very Watchmen.
Okay, so it's written by Robert Venenti.
Okay, I like his writing.
It's drawn by Galvin Goodry, or Goodray.
Don't know him. Okay.
Goodray, I guess.
Gidry. Like Ron Gidry, that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Galvin
Gidry. That's Gidry. Like the pitcher, okay. Ron Gidry.
Colored by Jordi Belair and lettered by Dave Lamphere. And it is well drawn. I find that let me get to the page with members of the Daily Planet, and it matches enough with the actors.
Okay.
So close enough to recognize who they are.
Yeah.
And if you read
likenesses.
Yeah, just enough likenesses. And if you're, if you are familiar with the Superman books anyway, you know who Perry is, you know who Jimmy Olsen is. And so it takes place in that time period. And you find out within the storyline that it obviously is after at least the first movie, because Lois knows that Superman exists. So the characters that are there in the universe, so to speak. It has to do with a storyline with Russia. So some kryptonite ends up falling into Russia. So the Russians have kryptonite. And through the course of the story, Lois is investigating and getting into trouble. Military selling some hardware. And so she obviously gets into her little trouble, calls for Superman to save her. So it's kind of like if you were watching the third or fourth movie, I guess you could say. And there's an ad for Batman '89, so they're doing the various movie tie-ins. And Batman '89, according to this, looks like yes, they're going to introduce Harley Quinn and a Scarecrow. So through the course of the story, you find out some military items are being sold, and they're creating a Metallo. I think that's the name of the kryptonite. Kryptonite battle suit type thing. So, there's comic book elements being brought into that movie universe. So, and again, it's just something that I saw, and it's like, okay, let me give it a try. I've read like some of the Batman 66, and I have fun with it. I have one of the Wonder Womans, the Linda Carter Wonder Womans, and I had fun with it. I don't know if they would ever do a crossover. They should, have a movie TV Justice League, because we always wanted that as a kid. But I enjoyed it. it was a good read, and the artwork, the likenesses are there.
Gus approves of the suits.
What's that?
Gus approves of the suits.
He does? Okay.
Yeah.
And it feels like it reads like think like a 70s book or like the movie itself. There's the him using the regular powers that we are aware of. I don't know if he's going to ever pull the S off and do that, or that was a one-shot deal for the first movie. And again, I don't know continuity-wise where it takes place, but again, I'm digging the art style. I'm digging the coloring.
So, yeah, those pages look very Watchmen-like. Maybe it's the monocolor, straight-on shots.
The art kind of looks like Steve Dillon.
So I recommend it. I think it's a good read. I'm enjoying it. So to me, it's like this was a fun thing to pick up and read it on my way home from the comic book shop.
Friar Tuck says, "Well done on the Guidry baseball reference. Didn't peg you as having sports knowledge, comics, music, pop culture. Definitely sports. I have vast knowledge of NFL football."
Yes, I can agree that he does. Every now and then he'll post something. It's like I have no idea what he's talking about, but you're enjoying that football.
I've been a New York Giants fan my whole life. Watch all the games. Baseball only peripheral. Other sports only peripherally. I mean, I know something about them, but I'm not nearly as into any other sport as I am to NFL football.
So, sorry. So the next book that I picked up and read on the train is G.I. Joe. Even though it says 1 on there, it's really tiny. It's actually 301. Yeah. So
I read 300 and enjoyed it, I remember, but I didn't pick up 301.
Did 300 end on a cliffhanger at all?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
It ended in the middle of a battle.
I see.
It began in the middle of the battle, and it ended in the middle of the battle. Friar Tuck is a Jets fan here since about 1985. Yeah, I've been a Giants fan since about 72.
So here's the opening shot. So you can see the inside cover.
Right.
Is all that text.
Wow.
So here's who worked on it.
Larry
Hama. Larry, of course, is continuing
Chris Mooningham. Pat Brousseau is lettering it. Francesco Segala is the colorist. Yeah, like I said, I bought issue 1 of G.I. Joe and then issue 300 of G.I. Joe. That's how long it was for me between G.I. Joe issues. But I got to say, I liked 300. It was perfectly readable comic.
So I thought that's a good way to put this, because if you don't know anything about G.I. Joes, this is a good first issue because it tells you basically who G.I. Joe is, what their mission is, who Cobra is, what their deal is about. So you get all that information if you never read a G.I. Joe comic, and then it opens up right into action.
Okay.
And since I didn't pick up issue 300, I had no idea what was going on, really. I thought, okay, we're going to jump right into action.
It was a big climatic battle between G.I. Joe and their enemies, whoever they are.
Exactly. So that's what's going on here. We have a countdown. So we do know a big explosion or something is going to happen soon. And it opens up right into the action. So we're not getting an introduction of these characters. It just goes right into action. People are screaming people's names. So if you are aware of the Joes, which I am, I know basically the players in it, and it goes on into this countdown. So they introduce some characters I'm not aware of. On the covers of, because I got the alternate cover, but on the covers of the regular issues, you do see that there is a character that didn't make it out of the mission. So it's like trying to, you're reading it, trying to figure out some of the new characters, and it reads quite well. I did enjoy it. Got a nice little letter from Larry about his time on G.I. Joe, and he thanks so many people he worked on with it from Marvel through the different eras, because G.I. Joe was published by a few different companies. And then you get a roster in the back of some of the main characters that you're aware of. So out of it, maybe 4 of them I weren't really aware of. And Serpentor's last name is Khan, which I was not aware of.
Serpentor was created from the DNA of multiple warlord and dictators and conquerors from the past by Dr. Mindbender. I guess
that is correct. Writing. Yes. So Serpentor is, so you have Cobra Commander, and then Serpentor is above him because Serpentor is like the emperor. But it was a perfectly good book. It was fun to read because it goes right into action. And it doesn't feel like the older G.I. Joes. It does in the sense of, Larry is writing it, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to sell you a new toy every 3 pages. Because it is a Hasbro product.
A good comic. Let's veer off into, we're going to veer off into football for just a second. I just missed the Fran Tarkington days. Norm Snead is the first Giants quarterback I have any recollection of, mostly from his football card. And then he was, I distinctly remember when Craig Morton came to the Giants. That was like 74 or 75.
My connection to football is the Super Bowl Shuffle. That's all I got to remember. The Refrigerator Perry, because he was a member of G.I. Joe.
Yep, he was.
So it's like those are my connections to football in that kind of aspect. But again, to me, it was like it's visiting old friends, because G.I. Joe was definitely one of those very first comics I picked up before I would say I was collecting comics.
Right.
It was more
just reading them then.
I was buying them and reading them and tossing them out. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, I still had them. I didn't toss them out, but I wasn't quote unquote collecting. It was just I would see them, I would buy them, read them, enjoy them, and I went on.
You know what happened to them afterwards.
Right, exactly.
Then your mother was throwing them out. Yeah, like I said, I read issue 300 was a good comic. I'm not a G.I. Joe fan. I picked it up because sort of out of nostalgia for picking up issue number 1 and then never another issue. But it was also because it was one of those covers that had like every G.I. Joe character on it. And I just love, I'm a sucker for any cover with 500 characters drawn on it. I just think that's
right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I actually pre-ordered it to make sure I got that cover. And of course I read it and I was like, you know what? This is a good comic. I didn't want to collect it because I'm just not that big a G.I. Joe fan, but it was a good comic. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yep.
And did you pick up the facsimile of G.I. Joe number 1?
I was going to. I didn't, but I think I'm going to go back and pick it up because of hearing the change that was made in it. Or not the change, that it went back to the original script Larry turned in.
I think there's new pages in it.
There's new pages. Oh, I wasn't aware of that. So
I think that's what I was told. There's new stuff in it.
Okay, because I know that there was like a portion that was edited by Marvel that Larry didn't like, and they put it back in. I wasn't aware
that might be the new stuff. I don't know.
So I don't know if there was more material added to it. No, I didn't pick it up, but I think I will pick it up next time in the comic. Because after reading this issue, I do want to go back to issue 300 to pick it up to read the start of the storyline.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, it may have pulled me back in.
300 was not the start of the storyline.
Right.
300, 300 was sort of the start of the big battle. Whatever had happened before, they were starting their big battle now and going in and battling. But what's funny about the facsimile is I was looking at him going, oh, they put it on uncoated paper. Just, try to make it look like newsprint. And then John, who's works at the shop, who's also a G.I. Joe fan, went, the original was on Baxter paper. And I went, what?
It was, yeah.
They're trying to imitate something that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
See, what do we have here? Phil Simms was my recollection of the Giants. I still remember when he was drafted in '79. It was the Daily News or something had the big headline, Phil who? Because he was drafted from Moorhead State, like with a high draft pick. So people didn't agree with that draft pick. Early 80s, Marvel G.I. Joe was closer to real military than later incarnations. But yet Cobra got closer to real military later than earlier issues. I have watched JLS Comics. He does these little pieces, comic book pieces on who characters are, their history, where they came from. And I watch those sometimes, and that's where I got all my G.I. Joe knowledge from. He'd be like, who is Snake Eyes? And he'd go through the history of Snake Eyes and with, clips and everything of the comic books he appeared in and stuff like that. It was like that's where all my G.I. Joe knowledge comes from. He'd tell you which toys that appeared. He appeared first in the toy, then here, then then, and so I always found those interesting pieces. And there was a lot of real world military in G.I. Joe that I knew nothing about because I never collected it.
I always had a fascination with it because of the fact that it showed up as a toy line, a cartoon, and a comic book line, where it was
you were the right age for it.
I was the exact age. I was who they were marketing to because I bought the comics. I bought the comics. I watched the show. And I had some of the figures. And that was something that I shared with my older brother because he liked the toys and watched the cartoon, but he didn't read the comics.
What year did number one come out?
I want to say 1982 or 3.
83, maybe?
I think it was 83.
I think it was 82. Let me check here.
So I was 16, 17. That was too old for G.I. Joe. I remember buying it, and first of all, it was Herb Trimpe. I was not a Herb Trimpe fan.
1982.
82. So I was not a Herb Trimpe fan. Like I said, I bought the first issue. And what was fun, like I said, what I still remember about it, for a decade, it was the second issue that was more valuable. Because everybody ordered the first issue. Everybody got the first issue. But then nobody ordered the second issue. Nobody was interested in the second issue. But it slowly became a hit. And then nobody had the second issue. So for a decade, the first issue was like $10, and the second issue was like $25. Something like that. G.I. Joe.
Real American hero. And they had commercials.
Yeah, I remember the commercials.
Just before the cartoons, they had the commercials, and it was like, read the rest of the story in Marvel Comics. And I did.
Did I ever tell you the story about I met the woman who did the music for both G.I. Joe and the Transformers?
I don't recall. It doesn't sound like
name. Her name was Anne Bryant. Oops. Sequential Geek is here. Which G.I. Joe would he? I don't know enough G.I. Joes to know. But I'd be Snake Eyes because he's the cool one.
Because everybody wanted to be Snake
That's the only reason I pick him, because I can name him.
Right. For me, it's Breaker. He was the first G.I. Joe figure I had. And that was only because he was a plain-looking military guy that had a beard. And he came with the motorcycle. And I knew of the existence of G.I. Joe as the 12-inch figures back in the day, before the small ones that we got in the 80s. So the regular 12-inch GI Joe ones that first started, you had Joe Colton, who had a beard. I thought Breaker was Joe Colton. I thought they brought that character in the small, so that's why I wanted to him.
No, Osborne, you would not be Snake Eyes. Everybody else would be.
So it's like that's why I thought that was the same character, and he was the first GI Joe that I owned. So Breaker I would say would be my favorite. Although I know I own more Snake Eyes toys over the years than Breaker.
So let's flash back 20 years, I think it was, ago, about that. Maybe I was over at my cousin's and, talking to my cousin and her husband at a picnic, and other people at the picnic. And I'm sitting and talking to this one woman, Ann Bryant. You can look her up on Wikipedia. I think she's got a page. And we got to talking, and she told me, and she was in the middle of a lawsuit because this was when the G.I. Joe DVDs first came out. It was that long ago. And like I said, she did the music on both Transformers and G.I. Joe. And of course, when you do the music on these shows, you got contracts, you're in unions, you get paid. So she was supposed to get paid when the DVDs came out. So she started looking, she started figuring out why she wasn't getting paid. And she noticed in the G.I. Joe credits on the DVD, the music was now credited to other people who happened to be friends of whoever was producing the DVDs or something. And the G.I. Joe rights had changed hands over time. Like the rights to those actual cartoons went from this person to that person, so it bounced around a bit. So she ended up finding a lawyer and suing them. Because she was supposed to get paid. She was the one who did the music. She was supposed to get paid for it. And she never did. But then they eventually went into court, but she had all of her documentation.
Right.
She had all of the contracts, all of the stuff, which other musicians don't always have. So the other side was like, but it was still this when I first met her, this was still going on. But she was confident she was going to get paid. And then, of course, I didn't see her for years until another get-together at my cousin's that we were both at. And must have been 5 to 10 years later. I know it was by this time, social media was a thing. Like Twitter, I think, was a thing. Because by that, I said, "Oh, whatever happened with your court case?" And she was like a professor of music at this time now. And she was like so defeated because she found out like something about her lawyer had been working for the other side the whole time. And finding an entertainment lawyer is really, really hard because the big entertainment companies hire every entertainment lawyer, even for just a small job. So that they now have a conflict of interest when somebody wants to hire them. So she found like her whole case was sabotage. She now had no confidence she was ever going to get paid for that. And I was like, well, you have to complain about it on social media because shame is the only. You're obviously not going to win in the court. She didn't think she was. So the court of. You can only, like Neil Adams said, you can only shame these big companies into doing the right thing. You're never going to win in court with them, but she didn't want to do that at all. So,
no.
Then I read a few years later, she did her first Comic-Con ever. I was like, if you make this known, there will be people on your side. There are a lot of G.I. Joe fans out there who would not be happy with this story.
Exactly. The fans are loyal to the creators, not
but she
necessarily
never
the companies.
At least a certain number of them are.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them, but a certain number.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
It was only a few years ago that it was discovered that the theme to the Sony X-Men TV show was stolen from some guy in Hungary. And one of the guys who did segments for Inspector Gadget and Jason the Wheeled Warriors, he had to sue Shuki Levi and Haim Saban because he didn't get credited, and so he didn't get royalties.
Oh, okay.
Because the contract specified that you got royalties if you created the bumper music for the for the beginning and the end.
So did Anne Bryant's contract,
but not for the segments for the music playing in the background.
Let's see what. Osborne, do you own a parrot? Shipwreck, do you like boats? The G.I. Joe references are lost on me. Sounds fucked. It was, yeah. That was the first thing I told Neil Adams. They let me in his fucking y'all. I stepped right off the elevator and was like, thanks for what y'all did. Like I said, I like Neil Adams for what he did for creators' rights more than his art. Not that I don't like him for his art, but I like him for standing up for people, just for more than for his art, I'd say.
Yeah.
That was something people rarely do. And he did as much as he could of it. Let's see, another comic I got this week. Geiger Ground Zero. This is issue number 1. I think it's only 2 issues. I don't remember if you guys remember Geiger. It's Jeff Johns, Gary Frank, and Brad Anderson. It's part of the unnamed universe, and there's a new imprint by Gary Frank called, where is it here? Ghost Machine. So that's Gary Frank's and other people's new imprint within Image. So we're gonna get where is it? Jason Fabuk, Gary Frank, Brian Hitch, Jeff Johns, Lamont Maggie, Francis Manipole, Brad Meltzer, Peter J. Tomasi, and Madel Zichut. There's going to be a one-shot Ghost Machine, and I think they're all doing their own series. There's the unnamed universe. This is what Jeff Johns has been and Gary Frank have been working on. They did that. Junkyard Joe was better than Geiger. Junkyard Joe was the other unnamed. I liked that better than I even liked. Geiger was okay. Geiger was a solid B. Junkyard Joe I thought was an A. And this is sort of like I guess you'd call it the origin, but it's not really an origin because the story behind this is Russia nukes the U.S., starts a nuclear war, the war goes to hell, and somehow everything else is a post-apocalyptic world, but somehow Geiger got these nuclear powers. And this is the early days of him having nuclear powers. It's Gary Frank artwork. He does a nice job with it. Brad Anderson, colorist. Rob Lee, letter. It's another solid. I'd even give it a B+. 2 issues before they move on to whatever the next story is. Oh, there's a groundbreaking new era for comics. Characters and creators begins here. Geiger, Redcoat, Rook, Exodus, and Beyond. First Ghost, Rocketeers, and the Soulless. I guess those are all Ghost Machine comics. Redcoat is part of the unnamed. I guess those ones are all the ones other people. So a new creator-owned line with its own image, subtitle, sub logo. But you know what? I'm for another Geiger 2-issue series. I'm good with that. Ghost in the Machine merch and apparel. There you go. Scan that right in, and you can get your Ghost in the Machine apparel. Ghost in the Machine. I love JC. Strange concept, but enjoyable. More a Galaxy Ranger fan.
Jace and the Wheeled Warriors, it never ended. I don't think the toys were very successful because they were plants. The bad guys were plants that turned into tanks, but they turned into tanks magically. So they didn't have a plant form in the tank form. They only had the tank form in the toy. And they stole some stuff from Star Wars.
No ongoing sequential geek. There's what's ongoing these days. So more hype from Image that was supposed to be ongoing, then now nothing. Now they got 2 issues of BS, WTF, no on. I assume so. I don't know if any of these are going to be ongoing or not, but nothing, almost nothing is ongoing from any comic book company. What gets past issue 50 these days? Nothing, unless they renumber it. Unless they just put random numbers on it, which Marvel and DC do now.
Right, the legacy numbers.
Right. They
like if you wanted those
and have a legacy number.
Right. You can't have them both. You could have had the longest running comic book titles, but decided, nah, let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
And then let's start from number ones, all short term thinking. One of the other books that I picked up is, and I haven't got to read these yet, but the Uncanny Spider-Man.
All right, let me get a close up of that. The Uncanny Spider-Man. All right.
The Uncanny Spider-Man. This is where Nightcrawler is now Spider-Man. I don't know why yet. My brother read it. He says he probably have to read Fall of X because it's all connected, and it's like I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, nobody understood anything that went on with the X-Men after Hickman left.
So first page opens up right into the story.
A splash page? How crazy.
Not really. They're paneled. Maybe the next page is a splash page.
Or at least a story page. How crazy. There we go. Bam.
And then a puzzle. For
why not,
because Lego Star Wars, synergy, I guess. But at least there's an ad. Then you got this monstrosity.
Oh boy!
So I guess it teaches you how to read the book.
There's something I'll never read.
Which where the Fall of X is going on.
Could you design a page that was harder to read than that?
I think they can, because the typeface is tiny. And then some letter from Silver Sable International.
Oh. Okay.
And then they start into the story. Or they continue into the story. So other than that, I know nothing about it, other than it's a Nightcrawler story.
Did you pick up 1 and 2?
I did pick up 1 and 2 last week. My brother had read them. I haven't read them yet.
Okay.
But it was
that's why your brother couldn't. He said you have to read.
You have to read the other, what might be going on in Fall of X. So he was interested in the book just for the concept itself. Even
in Comic Junkies, what's it? Wow, it's showing that you have 1.2K thumbs up on this vid. What the heck? Why? How's that even possible? We got 11 people watching, which is high.
I don't know. I did mention it on my TikTok.
Wilson.
I did mention it on TikTok that we'll be doing a show tonight. Maybe people came in and gave us a thumbs up and then walked away.
Do you have 1,100 followers on TikTok?
No, not 1,100.
Yeah, that's.
I got 1,000. I got. What do I got? Let me check. Last count. 2,739 followers.
Mm-hmm. I doubt half of them would come over and thumbs up, so that's weird.
Well, maybe it's counting the thumbs up because you did this.
Hold on. Let's see if we can get. All right.
Maybe it's counting those thumbs up.
One thumbs up gives us just a thumbs up. Peace sign. What did that give us? Confetti. All right. One peace sign. What did that give us? Balloons.
Balloons. There you go.
Kiss my ass gives us nothing.
Nothing? Not at all?
About.
Maybe you do it towards the camera.
Holy hell, Wilson is hot on TikTok. See that? Mine, I see 4 thumbs up. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
I think Comic Cracks, maybe those are Canadian thumbs up. Maybe 4 thumbs up in the U.S. counts as 1.2K thumbs up in Canada.
Yeah, that exchange rate is killing you.
Yeah. That must be it. 4 sounds more usual.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, remember when I said I had a lost Carlos Pacheco interview?
Yeah.
I found the file.
You
found the file. Yes. Problem. If I put it on YouTube, I did the interview in Spanish. If I put it on YouTube, I'm going to have to put subtitles on it.
There might be something automatic for that. All of Canada's watching. You did the interview in Spanish.
Yeah.
Put subtitles on it.
I was in Ireland and I interviewed a Spanish guy in Spanish.
Could you have it? Can you have it translated or dictated, and then have that translated into English, and then re-upload that?
Well, on the YouTube tools, I think I can get the transcript, the automatic transcript,
right?
And then I could try running it through Depot.
Yeah. I think you can even put the caption, the automatic transcript in another language on YouTube. I think it gives you options of what language. You have to look into that.
Yeah, not in the mood because that thing was almost an hour.
Not today. Speaking of ongoings, the final issue of Time Before Time, issue 29, came out. There he is going into the time machine one last time. Really good. The last 2 issues, they really ended this well. And for this last issue, Rory McConville and Declan Shalvey are the writers. And Declan Shalvey, he described, Rory Conville described in here that Declan Shalvey offered to co-write it with him just so Rory McConville could break into the U.S. market. But Joe Palmer is the artist, and he was the artist on the first 6 issues. He was the co-creator, so he came back for the last issue to draw that too. And it was just really well done because this one takes place with gangsters running time travel, the Syndicate, and I forget who else. And our story there were other stories in between about these 2 people, Tetsuo, who got into trouble with one of the gangster organizations and ended up owing them money, so he had to run. And most of their time travel is delivering things. It's delivering people. It's delivering things. If you want to escape, they'll deliver you to another time. If you want something from another, so it's all kind of and it's like the general population doesn't know about it. So he was he was running the time machine, and the time machine, due to the fact that they didn't care about its poor shielding, eventually got him sick. And so in the very first issues, an FBI agent, I forget her name, the female lead, she kidnapped him to try and find her family, who were screwed over by time travelers when she was young. So he and she were time traveling, trying to escape these syndicates and looking for her family. And that story, with various branches, went on for all these issues. And then he was dying. Like I said, he got some sort of radiation point. He even tried going to the future to get a cure for it. He couldn't get a cure. And then at one point they split up, and she thought he died because he only had a week left to live. Instead, the head of the time travel syndicate had some medicine that could arrest his disease but not cure it. And he gave it to this guy just to torture him, just because he wanted him alive, because I think Tetsuo killed this gangster's father somehow, or was responsible for the father dying. So he wanted him alive to suffer, and he made him work for him again, still sick, but arrested, and the disease arrested. And he also threatened to kill people he loved if he didn't keep working for him. So Tetsuo was like, oh, well, I'm stuck here. Meanwhile, the other girl, the stuff with her family didn't work out, and she ended up stealing a time machine, and she wants revenge against the syndicate. So she's been like time traveling, trying to get revenge against this one criminal syndicate. And somewhere along the way, they pick up a robot. And usually you can't bring machines back to you can't, for some reason, you can't bring like robots and machines back with you through time travel, except for this one. And no one ever figured out why this one robot could time travel, though they tried to kidnap him and find out. So the climax of the story, to spoil it, because none of you are reading it anyway,
I was living the adventure through your reviews of it.
I figured I may as well give a good adventure recap of it. Like last issue, eventually Tetsuo and Abigail, or was that the fake name she used, met up again, and he was like, what had happened was the criminals set a trap for Abigail, the FBI agent woman, because they figured out that she was trying to wreck them. They're like, well, let's set a trap for her. They set a trap. She fell for the trap and was going in. And Tetsuo and the robot were trying to save her from the trap. In order to save her from the trap, it took time, and he had to go off his med. So he knew he was going to die because the disease would take him if he got off these meds that the gangster was giving him, which he had to do in order to save Abigail, or something with an A, in order to save her. So at the end of last issue, he ends up dying of the disease, but meanwhile, the plan he put in place was able to save Abigail. So that was like a really sad issue 28. And I was like, well, what are they going to do for the epilogue? What are they going to do? They kind of ended the story with issue 29, with issue 28. So what's issue 29 going to be? And this issue was interesting because we got a flashback to him in his younger days. And it turns out that his friend, the woman, in her old age, has younger him deliver a package to her. So she gets to see him one last time. But the younger version of him before they even met. So she kind of gets to talk to him, because you can't change time in this, She can't save him because he died. So this issue is just, younger version of him and older version of her sitting and chatting for a while. And he doesn't know her from Adam. And she's just having a good time talking to him. And then we get another flashback to like the day after he saves her, and he's dead, but he leaves her a recorded message. So this is his like last words to her on a recorded message. And it's real poignant. They do a real good job with it. And then so we get older her talking to younger him. And then we flash back to younger her, who was just saved by now dead him. getting the message from him and him, saying goodbye, basically. And then we flash forward again to them, younger him and older her, having a chat before he has to leave. And, she gives him a big hug bye, and he doesn't even know why, because he's never met her before,
Right.
And then he just kind of, where is it? He just kind of rides off, younger, confident him just kind of rides off into the sunset in the time machine. And there was our last page, him just leaving in the time machine. So I was like, it was last issue was really poignant, but this one was really poignant too. It was just a really nice epilogue sort of ending to the story. So I got to say, this has been one of my favorite series. I think they said they said they got this out monthly. I didn't even realize that, because in looking back, I'm always like, oh, they must have taken a break at some time. But they got 29 issues out monthly of this, they said. It's like, oh, cool. A really nice wrap up to the series. If you want to read a good series, Time Before Time is one of them. Even if I just told you a lot of them. There's many branches and side quests to the story, too.
Yeah, and it would make a pretty good, trade paperback.
Oh, yeah. It's various trade paperbacks now. I think there's 29 issues. So.
Right.
Paolo we trust. Looking forward to that Pacheco lost file to hear you speak. Castellano. So, wasn't the Canadian dollar and euro doing better than the U.S. dollar? You would think so, but not in YouTube likes. How many languages does Paolo speak, or at least understand, other than Portuguese, Spanish, and English?
French. I'm not fluent, but I get around it well enough. If you come with me to France, we will not go hungry. I can read Italian, but I can't have a conversation.
Menu Italian?
No, if you can read Spanish and French, you should be able to read Italian without having to learn it.
And does he still do his own brakes and oil changes?
No, there's a mechanic for that.
Time Before Time. This was like the little series that could.
Right.
I really liked, I remember it had a very good first issue. And then the second issue was okay, and then it got better and better, and the story arc ended. And then there were a couple of done-in-ones, and then it got better and better, and the story arc ended. And it just kept getting better and better, I think. It was not that it was bad to start out with, but I kept expecting it to take a turn for the worse, especially since they had various artists on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out I think this Rory McConville is a pretty good artist, because pretty good writer, because he's also been writing everybody's favorite, Spawn. I like that gorilla.
Love that cover.
I like that gorilla cover.
Yep, with Cygor. Is it Cygor?
Yes. Who does this? Dan Panosian. Still only $2.99. And Rory McConville, Todd McFarlane, additional script. Carlos Barberi does the art with Z Carlos. Z-E with an accent that goes up over the last E. So I don't know what that means.
Zé Carlos.
Zé Carlos. Why would you need an accent if there's only two letters?
Because it's José.
Ah. But some nice artwork by those guys. And I got to say, the story picked up pretty well, too. There's a big heaven-hell war going on, but big things happened in this issue. And it was really, I think I enjoyed this issue more than other issues of Spawn. But I have to show the production lettering mistake to Wilson. Let's see, where is it? It's here somewhere. There's a stray balloon tail.
Oh, I've done that.
Has it gotten printed?
Yeah.
Where did it go? Hold on. There we go.
It bypassed me, all the editors.
See that little piece of white right there?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm
That's
pretty
so
sure that's a
tiny.
stray balloon tail because it's the
Yep, yep.
same. And
That's
there's also
exactly what that is.
I don't know what this is. Look at that. There may be another stray balloon. See that little edge of a
Yeah, that looks
ellipse
like a
right
balloon
there?
behind.
Looks like there's a balloon. I don't know what that is because it's not part of it. But I was like, hey, I think that's a stray balloon tail.
That that most likely the other one is
Yeah,
half of the balloon. Not half, it's the
right.
curve of the balloon. So I believe the balloon was mainly erased, but
Okay.
it wasn't selected correctly. It depends on which arrow tool you use
Yeah.
to select the balloon, and you end up erasing most of the balloon. But that little spot, because it's in that white gutter area, you can miss it easily.
Ah.
But there's a few books out there that I have a long tail just floating on the side there. It it happens. It's gotten printed. Yeah. I won't mention the titles because I don't know if, well, the editor didn't catch it. I didn't catch it. And it's
Yeah.
sometimes what happens is you don't catch it because sometimes we're working in black and white, and that's
Right.
harder to spot it in black and white.
Oh yeah, that
Because
little balloon tail. That's tiny.
yeah, it's tiny.
Was this Tom Orzechowski lettering this? Tom Orzechowski.
Yep. Who's been doing it longer than me, so
Yeah.
we've all done it. Yeah.
I saw that and went, ooh, look at that. Somebody lost a balloon tail. And I looked to see if it came off one of the balloons, but it didn't. It's just a
Right.
stray. I wonder how many people noticed that besides me. I always wonder stuff like that because probably most people won't even notice it.
Now, the first time the letterer is going to notice it is when he gets his comp copies and he's flipping through it. And that's where I catch it. I think, oh, dang.
Hey, I changed a tire for the first time this week, says mine in the comics. Our Joe. Monkeys are great and funny in real life and TV, plus better in comics. That's no monkey.
You know that most people nowadays can't change a tire.
Yeah, I plugged a tire a couple years ago. But I'd have to have I'd go to YouTube and get a refresher how to change a tire on a 2009 Honda Civic.
Yeah, I had to learn how to change a tire because I had a flat and nobody was there to change it for me.
I actually changed a tire in decades, and I don't drive, so I don't work on cars. This past week, a buddy of mine I was hanging out with, and we were his dad's car wasn't running, so I was like, okay, get the jumper cables, let's use those. And it's like, where's the battery? And it was in the trunk. Like, yeah. So it's like, what's it doing in the trunk? And what's the hood for then? Why is it not there?
Was it a BMW?
No, I don't know what kind of car it was, but it was a hybrid. So the battery wasn't where I normally would think the battery would be.
Well, the battery for the engine is not the same battery as for the electronics. So the 12 volt battery should still be in the front, especially because now the bigger battery is taking up the whole of the rear. But yeah, BMWs, they usually hide the battery in the trunk.
Oh, okay. I don't know the make and model of this car, so unfortunately.
When I plugged a tire, matter of fact, I had just driven to the Newark airport. Doing Bob Wycheck a favor, dropped him off at the airport. Made it all the way back home with no incident. It was winter, so I parked the car in the garage. Next morning, next day, whatever it was, I came out to use the car, and the driver's side front tire was flat. And I went, oh, what do I do? Because I've never had a flat tire before. Right. Luckily, like a week or two before, my brother-in-law, who knows how to do everything, was showing me how to plug a tire because he was doing it for his son. And even, I just happened to be visiting that day, and he's like, I want to see how to plug a tire. I was like, sure. I'm a handy guy too, so I like to learn to do things. So he showed me just how to plug a tire. So I was like, I got to go. So I looked at the tire, and sure enough, there was a screw right in the tire.
Wow.
And I was like, I think I can plug that. So I borrowed my sister's car, went to the local auto shop, got a tire plug kit, went on YouTube how to plug a tire just as a refresher, saw how to do it, went out there and plugged my tire. Then I went online after I plugged it to figure out what to do next, because some people online say I would never drive a car on a plugged tire for very long. And other people say that plug is going to be stronger than the rest of the tire. Don't worry about it. So I was like, and my father was like, I wouldn't drive on a plugged tire. So I was like, so I'm going to take it to the tire shop. I went to the tire shop. The tire guy went, it's holding air? I went, yeah. He's like, don't worry about it. So I rode on that until like last year when I had to replace the front tires and got new ones. So the plug held just fine. And now I keep the tire plug kit in the trunk of the car along with a tire pump, because I figure it's a good enough place to keep it. I got to keep it somewhere. And if I'm out on the road and get a nail or a screw through my tire, I'll have the kit there.
Yeah, better to have it with you, not need it.
Than going, why do I keep that? Why do I keep that kit at home?
Right.
What's the point of that? It was not easy to fit the spare in. Yeah, that's why I was like, I think if it's like a hole in the tire, like a screw, I would rather plug the tire on the road than try to change it for the spare.
Yeah, there are cars that you can't put the flat tire in the spare tire room. It doesn't fit because the spare tires nowadays are always smaller.
Right, they're donuts.
Yeah, and some idiots designed the spare tire compartment to not fit the regular tire, which is stupid.
I actually today got much easier than a car. I got when I was out on my bike, I got a flat tire. This is my third flat tire in 3 weeks, all by staple gun staples. And I'm like, what? I have never got a flat. I mean, I got plenty of flats in my bike riding times. They happen, 12 times a year easily, 12 to 24 even. Yeah. I ride 5 days a week. But never from I'm like, what's going on around here that people are, how does a staple even like stand up? I was like, I have to ride over it and has to like stand up to get into the tire. And I know they're staples because they're sticking out of the tire when I go to change the tube.
Right.
I was like, how is that possible? Jared has an ex that owns a staple gun. That could be it. You never know. I picked up a couple more. Let's see. Geiger was a first issue. I picked up 2 more first issues this week. By the way, I was complaining about this cover on my pull list. First of all, that logo is terrible.
Yes.
That's just too literal. The actual and the cover design itself is pretty I mean, that drawing's nice.
It's a nice drawing, but you can't read it from the shelf.
No, but you can't read the logo. The rest of the design is like
And does the company's own logo have to be that big?
Well, at least you can see it. You can't see the rest.
Now, the other problem is that you have the company logo the same color as the rest of the cover.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. I should have picked another cover off of the shelf, but I was too lazy to. I was like, I kind of like this one because this is the one I think I picked. I think I only put the first issue on my pull list, and One of the other covers said "The Erotic Classic" by somebody. What's her name here? By Sarah H. Cho, which led me to believe it was a reprint, but I don't think it is. Here's a little. I'll show you some of the art. The art looks pretty nice. I think I looked through. I got the first issue because I liked some of the art when I saw it online when I was ordering. But I ended up. I don't think I'm going to get any more. Oh, that's Frank Cho's wife. Oh, okay. He did one of the. He did a much nicer cover. Sarah H. Cho. Oh, that means that. Who was it? Scott Koblish, I think. Was it him? Somebody we know who we've talked to on one of these went to high school with. No, it wasn't Frank Cho. It was Adam Hughes's wife, I think it was, not Frank Cho's. I'm mixing up cheesecake artists. Illustrated by Priscilla Petraites Petraites. And it wasn't bad. It was strange because Comic Crack, what Comic Crack tell us? So, with my new car, there's one lug nut that is different from the other. Needs a special socket for it. Really, yeah, I've heard of those. Definitely. I forget what they're called. My brother-in-law has complained about them. From a distance, it's like abstract colors. Yeah, and the light you can't even see from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Frank Cho. Yeah, kind of that's messed up. I hope you're able to change the time. They do that so you have to call a shop or something. Oh yeah, I did it. The special socket was in the glove box with the rest of the car manual. Oh, okay. So they didn't do. So that's intentional to prevent theft. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy. Like the thieves wouldn't get that special socket. But the story starts with this woman who is some sort of sex worker. And then it goes on to reveal that she's sort of a sex worker against her will. And I'm like, erotic thriller. This is kind of a horror. And then you find out she's a robot sex worker who is the first one they gave emotions to, but all the robot sex workers are there against their will. And this is what happens when you try to escape. Is they smash you and show you to all the other robot sex workers. So this is all about her. And I guess, hold on. This is all about her. There's her. I guess there's a picture of what's her name? I forgot already. Cho. Sarah H. Cho. But it wasn't bad. You know what's funny? The word that came to me after reading it was pathos. And then I had to look up exactly what pathos meant. And pathos means sort of playing on your emotions. A story that's filled with pathos is playing on your emotions. And I think there was too much pathos in this for me. Just not my style. It was okay. I enjoyed it. But I was just kind of like, what? Huh? There was too much forced sex with a robot in it for me. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of like, oh, it's an emotional robot. It was just, but the art was nice. There was nothing. I just don't think it's just not for me. Might be for you. But it's weird that the word that came to mind was pathos, and then I just had to look up exactly what it meant because I wasn't 100% sure. I love when words are like that. I'm like, why is that word in my head to describe whatever this genre is? There was too much forced sex with a robot for me. What a review. For my particular taste, there was too much forced sex with a robot.
Your mileage may vary.
If you're going to give a robot free will,
Uh-huh.
you can't then force them to have sex with you. What's the point of that?
It's okay that they can go through time, but they shouldn't, because that's the second book that you read that robots.
They go through time of their own free will.
Free will.
Then there was one time they went to in that book where they immediately tried to kill the robot because this particular group of people had to go back in time because robots killed all the humans in this time. It was like that was the ultimate fate of humanity, was for robots to kill all the people.
Sarah Connor.
Unlike not enough forced sex with a robot. Exactly.
You know, there's a Silver Age Superboy story where he loses his cherry to a robot. Really?
Willingly, you know.
So another book that I picked up is I have to check if I even picked up the first issue, but it's the Spine Tingling Spider-Man.
Spine tingling.
What? Why?
Oh, I don't know. I know nothing. I know nothing about it. It was like, oh, another Spider-Man book. What is this? Is it Peter Parker and horror? I do not know. But it has.
Well, first of all, you don't know if it's Peter Parker.
Yeah, I have no idea if it is.
That's a lot of introductory text.
Oh yeah, it says Peter Parker was bitten by radioactive spider. So I'm going to.
This is not his story.
But this is not his story, which would be a great way to open it. So it looks like Peter.
Okay. Or it looks like a version of Peter.
Right. And I figured issue 1 must have came out last month, so it would have been around the Halloween time. And it has some creepiness to it. So maybe they're going
Spider-Man horror. They made him a POC Santa in a wheelchair. ASMR Spidey. You'll have multiple Batman and Spider-Man comics, and you will like it.
Yes, it's now a franchise. You too can be a Spider-Man if you like to. And yeah, it looks like
you can be
Spider-Man. Torturing Jonah.
Okay.
So it's very Hellraiser in that sense.
It's Spider Saw.
And Mary Jane's there too. But I don't know what's going on. So figured I'll give that a check. And staying within the Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 37. And I happened to get the variant cover for the
Spider-Ham cover?
No, Disney.
Disney character.
Okay.
Disney Comics in the Secret Wars kind of motif.
Right.
Although I do not probably agree which characters they picked, but they also didn't put all the characters that were in Secret Wars on the cover. But it's a Disney cover, so it's a what if type of thing.
Is Mickey there twice, or is Minnie Iron Man?
Minnie is Iron Man, because you can see the bow on her head.
Okay.
See, so if it was, it clears up. So you can see it's the bow. So it's Minnie.
You know, the Disney characters have actual superhero identities in Italian Disney comics.
Do they?
Mm-hmm. The Minnie ones have not been particularly successful.
Spine straightening Spider-Man, and he's a chiropractor.
Super Goof stories were originally appeared in the U.S., although we prefer them when made outside the U.S. And Donald's superhero identity has been active for over 40 years.
Wow!
No, for over 50 years. Paperinik debuted in 1969.
Count Nefaria. I actually recognize him.
Yeah. Why the hell did they bring back Count Nefaria? I think he died, then came back, then died, then came back, then died, then came back. I wasn't sure if he had died and come back again.
He got better. It's like there's a ROM X-Men crossover coming soon.
Sequential Week does not like that. How weak artwork. Look at that artwork of one of the wealthiest global conglomerates in this fake country.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should get...
Hey, Scott Summers always sounded like Donald to me. The cover, at least, the interiors look okay. Yeah. You know they didn't put a ton of thought into those covers. So.
I now own you.
Well, yeah, you have that, and I'm sure, who knows how many revisions this cover must have gone through, because it would have to be approved and go back and forth and back and forth. And you're using
Disney still doesn't care about Marvel Comics themselves.
Not at all. Not at all. But I got it because of the Secret Wars spoof on it. And then the last book,
reliving his youth with Secret Wars.
Yep. And Transformers. So here's issue 2 of Transformers.
Issue number 2.
Hey.
I remember you liked issue number 1, but weren't thrilled with it.
Actually, I didn't read issue number 1. My brother did.
Your brother. That's right.
So he read it first, and it was like I wanted to get a couple of issues before I read it, because sometimes you'll read one issue and it's like, that was the first issue. Let me read a couple of them in a row to see what, and then to decide what I think about it. Because the two things that I heard from other people is that if you're a Transformer fan of the comic books, it might make you mad. Or if you were a fan of the cartoons, you might enjoy it. But I heard different versions of it. So I'm not really sure how people are judging it. And I kind of picked it up. I haven't picked up any of the outside stuff, like that issue that you picked up with the Void
Rivals.
I think if I picked it up like you did and wasn't aware what was going on and ran into that Transformer thing, I think I would have enjoyed that. That kind of a discovery, but I wasn't sure if I'm going to pick up any of the other titles that are a part of this universe, because I believe G.I. Joe connects to it, but I don't see if I'm going to pick up like G.I. Joe Duke. He's getting his own book, and there's actually a preview of it in here.
Yeah, nice drawing. Who's drawing that book?
This particular
image, I saw those ads and was like, oh, not bad.
Let's see if it says it on here.
And there's a fan of Paolo's Mickey impersonation. I know. Yeah, the covers are not as good as Carl Barks. That goes without saying. Transformers is Daniel Warren Johnson. Oh, yeah.
Tom Riley is doing the artwork for Duke.
I think I know that name. I don't know where from.
The Thing.
Okay.
Marvel's The Thing, it says here. And Joshua Williamson is the one doing the writing for the Duke series.
Okay. Duke of oil.
But I don't know if I would want to get the other extra stuff.
You don't know if you want to go that deep into it.
Right, exactly. Even though I'm interested in the lore and what's going on with it, I don't know how much I want to invest into getting this particular series from Skybound. I really don't know. So I think if I enjoy the G.I. Joe and the Transformer books, maybe I'll get those other ones. But this is what I'm trying out.
The last comic I got for the week is another number 1 from IDW, a $6 extra large one by who's doing this? John Ridley is the writer. I don't think I know him at all. The artist is Stefano Raffaele. R-A-F-F-A-E-L-E. Raffaele.
Yeah, Stefano Raffaele.
Stefano Raffaele. The art's nice. Mm-hmm. Colorist is Brad Anderson. Letterist is Ariana Maher. M-A-H-E-R. Maher. There's a nice decapitation page. Though I have to say, this had some of the most boring covers I've ever seen. Probably because the lead character is this woman standing there in all gray in a pantsuit with a trench coat. Let's see. I think they had the other ones back here. There she is standing there waving her sword around. There she is standing there with somebody else. There she is standing there twice. And there she is with a bunch of people on a rock. At least there's some kind of fight going on that one. But the artwork inside is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. Now there's nobody standing there.
There was nobody standing there.
No, it reminded me of the meaning of that scene from the Meaning of Life. Now there's Uncle Ted on the side in front of the house. And it's a picture of Uncle Ted in the side of the house. And there's a picture of Uncle Ted in the back of the house, but you can see the front. And there's a picture of the Spanish Inquisition.
If they had a Spanish Inquisition cover, I'd get that one. But it's like, I'm sitting there trying to decide, because like this is when I pulled off the shelf, because I flipped through it, liked the artwork. Who did this cover? This is a Ryan Sook cover. And it's not like it's badly drawn or anything. It's just boring. And this is the most interesting of them there. And I had no idea what it was about. The Ministry of Compliance gives me no clue. Besides, they're going to make you comply. But it turned out to be a pretty interesting story. It starts out, the first quarter of it, sort of like your basic conspiracy story, where she's like the enforcer for the Ministry of Compliance. In the Ministry of Finance, she has to go in there and kill some people because they were embezzling. And then there's a ministry of this, a ministry of that. You get the feeling there's sort of like the Illuminati behind the scenes running the world. And so there's the first, quarter of it goes on like that. And then there's the reveal. The reveal is that they're actually aliens from another, another planet, another galaxy, another wherever. And this is how they take over worlds. They sort of go in, they take over the leadership. They cause chaos, they sow discord, and then they take over. And I guess they've been at it for 40 years on Earth, and they're just waiting for whatever, the Great Awakening or whatever. And humans don't know they're there, because they look like humans, and they can look like humans or whatever. But halfway through, we also discover, and the story's about her, she's running the Ministry of Compliance, and it becomes very, spy, James Bond spy, a lot of subterfuge going on and some violence too. But there's the Ministry of Transportation. And they are the ones that have all of their spaceships. So when it comes time to conquer Earth, they can all leave. They can conquer Earth and they can all leave and go home. Because they don't really want to be on Earth. Conquering Earth, they'd rather be on their own. It's a job for them. It's a calling. It's a public service. But what's happening is being on Earth has corrupted some of them, and they've been embezzling and living the good life on Earth. That's where she gets to make them comply. So they're like, so then she's in another big meeting, and like there's somebody who's ahead of her, like back on wherever their planet is. There's the president or whoever he is, the big minister who runs all the ministries on Earth. So they go to have a meeting with him, and the shadow cabinet, who are the guys who are behind the president, are like, sorry, the president's gone. We're going to have to get a new one. You guys just hold still until then. which makes all the ministries on Earth get a little itchy. So they start trying to lock down their positions, make sure everything's secure there. And she decides she wants to make sure that the Ministry of Transportation is secure so that they can all get back and see, because she sees things happening within her own alien people on Earth, that there's a little unrest going on. It's her job to lock it down. So she goes to the Ministry of Transportation in England, wherever it is, and they're all dead. And she manages to figure out there are assassins there. She kills them all, but it turns out that Earthlings have figured out that they're there. And they need codes for the ships, which they don't know where they are now. The Earthlings may have them. So it ended up being really intriguing by the end. So I definitely liked this one. And like I said, it started out being something, and then there were reveals, and we got more players in the game who have different roles. And I'm going to get some more of this. Definitely going to get some more of this. I enjoyed the first issue. There was no forced sex with robots. You made that name up, Daniel Lauren Johnson. Yeah. Made of some non-fiber material, so blood drips right off. Actually, this sword is a special sword. So yes, blood. What it is with this sword is it's called like a sun sword or something. They actually describe it early on. It's because it's some. It's called the. It's not gray matter. It's the gray matter sword. No, it's all me. What's the name of it? It's a special sword that has like the weight of a star behind it or something. It cuts through everything really easily. Does not get stuck in human flesh like a regular sword. I guess it makes the blood drip off it really easily too. The other guy uses her assistant. What did they call it? Now I got it. It was right in the beginning. I just killed their boss. Oh well, the star sword or the moon sword or the something sword. But anyway, good issue. I'm going to buy some more of this stuff. If only she had knickers over her pants. I knew that name was familiar. Dan Wunsch did Extremity. Yeah, he did a bunch. I heard his name before I ever bought his stuff. Oh, and the sword also folds up real small. But good stuff. Good stuff, this one. One last comic that I got from, I'm glad. And it's also extra thick. It's at least 60, at least 48 pages, I'd say. Could go as high as 64, I'm not sure. But there's also ads and covers in the back, so it's not all comics. But my God, these covers are boring. I was really standing there going, I want to buy this comic. Which boring cover should I pick? And I'm surprised IDW is still putting out comics.
Where was the last we heard the situation they were in?
Yeah, last we heard don't worry, the owner's son was coming in to save the company.
Right.
No need to worry.
We got top men on it. Top men.
What, the top men on it? Yeah, we never even got to talk about our discovery this week on Robert Birnbaum's posts, where he's naming names.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I wasn't aware of any of that. That was interesting to read.
Yeah,
yeah. I guess that'll be a subject for next time.
Yeah. But anybody who doesn't know, Robert Birnbaum is a He's been around. He was a comics dealer in the late 60s, from like the mid to late 60s on, and he ran a lot of comic shows, and he knows a lot about comics history, and was there for a lot of the retail comics history stuff. And I've always read a story about in some sci-fi convention in 1969, he and one of his buddies were taken up to a hotel room where they bought like $1,200 worth of comics original art for like $5 a page, like whole Neil Adams books, Jack Kirby art, all this stuff. And there was tons and tons of art there. But no one ever said who sold it until I noticed this week. He was like, it was Marvel editors at the time, which you knew it had to be an inside sale because that's where the art was at Marvel. But finally, I saw the names. Let's see. Bale in the movie Equilibrium was what the Ministry of Compliance reminds me of. Oh, yeah. Now that you mention it, I can see that. Gun Fu. Have you guys seen that movie?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was a fun one. Him jumping around shooting people.
The thing about the art theft is that Roy Thomas was already he was remember what he said about Neil Adams after he died. Yes. And now this, and now the other time when I showed you the link about the other guy who wants to prove that that Larry Lieber didn't write any of the Monster comics.
Right.
And Roy Thomas directing the interview with Lieber so that he said what he wanted to support the view that Stanley created, that Roy himself pushes, that Stan created everything.
Right.
And now there's about Roy being involved in the art theft.
Right.
Considering that he spent.
Roy Thomas said nothing. He said, I had nothing to do with this. I wasn't there. I don't know what this guy's talking about. But Robert Birnbaum puts him in the room when all this comic art was being sold.
Yeah, and the thing is, Roy Thomas, who likes to be part of the comics, the crew that explores the history of comics, and now everything he says is. You have to be suspicious of anything that he claims, because he's been directing history in a way that benefits him.
Right. He's been directing history in ways that are not historical. That directly benefits him. So, and that makes me question the one time I talked to him when I asked him about that story I heard at Marvel, and he said, "What? That's not true. I had nothing to do with stats." For those who don't know that story, I was told this story at Marvel more than once. I can't remember by who, but the scuttlebutt was when Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief of Marvel in whenever it was, the early 70s. At one time, they were cleaning up some stuff, and there were stats of Marvel artwork. And for those of you who don't know what stats are, they're photostats. They're black and white photographs, basically a fancy photocopy of the artwork that they would then archive and use for reprints. They didn't use the original art for reprints. They used stats. So at one point, Roy as editor-in-chief, this is the story I was told. Roy as editor-in-chief decided there's a stat for you, decided that Marvel didn't need these stats, they could get rid of them. And then Roy, as a fan, decided he was going to take those stats home since Marvel was getting rid of them. Then a few years later, Marvel needed those stats, so they bought them from Roy Thomas. This is the story I was told. Many years later, just a few years ago, I actually met Roy only this one time, and I said, Roy, I told him that story. I said, I got to know if this is true. He's like, what? I have no idea what that story is. I never had anything to do with stats at Marvel. I was like, oh, okay, and I believed him. Now, I don't know if I believe him.
Yeah, because you think, why would anybody lie about stats?
Yeah.
I mean, people. Yeah, I took some stats home. They were going to throw them out. Sure, no problem.
And it was a story about Roy being clever and, getting one over on the man. Whoever told me the story wasn't telling it to me as a black mark on Roy. They were telling it to me as with admiration. So that makes me go, Yeah, I met Roy Thomas. He was not cool. Never a straight answer. He was kind of mechanical. I just thought he was maybe getting old. About a year ago at Mile High Comics was there for a minute. He owes me $10 too. Yeah, I never really had an opinion about Roy one way or the other. I only met him that one time and he was nice enough. It was just I don't know if you caught that show. When was that? 6 months ago, when the issue of Roy's magazine, Alter Ego, came out. And he wrote an editorial in it. It was after Neil Adams had died, and he wrote an editorial in it about Neil Adams. And I could not believe what I was reading. We spent a couple of hours here discussing it point by point. But this is Roy's own editorial in this issue of Alter Ego, and his lack of self-awareness was stunning. He clearly wanted to be the hero of his own editorial, because who wouldn't want to be? But he was just as clearly the villain. So here he was writing this editorial, and he was like, yeah, I had some problems with Neil Adams. He tried to explain some of the problems. But he was trying to make himself the hero of the story, but he wasn't succeeding. So that just reading that editorial changed my whole point of view on Roy Thomas. I was just like, wow, he has no self-awareness, and he's making stuff. He's trying to make stuff up to make himself look good. And it's so obvious that he's making himself look bad. It was not a good editorial.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Roy Thomas. I think your shirt sucks and mine is awesome. What's up?
Because when I found that blog where the guy was talking about Larry and mentioning the interview that came out in the 90s about Roy directing Larry's answers. Well, I don't think anybody can read.
For those of you who don't know, in the late 50s, there was a lot of monster comics from Marvel that Jack Kirby drew. And someone, and Stan Lee wrote a bunch of them. And I forget who, what is it, went back and proved that any story Stan Lee did not sign, he did not write. Someone else wrote those stories. Of course, the most obvious person is Jack Kirby wrote those stories, because Jack Kirby was a writer and he was drawing them. But sometime after Jack died, in the 90s, for some reason, they wanted to get it established that Larry Lieber wrote those stories. Larry had never claimed to write those stories. He was on record saying he didn't write those stories. But there's an interview with Roy Thomas interviewing him in the 90s where Roy Thomas is kind of directing him to say he wrote those stories. And so now a lot of people think Larry Lieber wrote the stories that Jack Kirby actually wrote. So, and that's the blog that Paulo discovered where someone had documented all this.
Yeah, I crunched some numbers, and I find it real. Even before that, I was finding it real hard to believe that Larry wrote everything, even if Stan was telling him on the phone what the story was going to be and just had to type it up.
Right.
But that would be too much. I mean, he would have to be writing Over 80 pages. More than that. Yes, 17.5. Yeah, you'd have to be writing 85 pages a month, which is too much, even in the Silver Age, especially for a guy who didn't have much writing experience.
Right. And in previous interviews, had not been writing much in those periods.
Yeah. I thought I would. There's a guy who has a blog. He's good at identifying writers that have not been credited, and he found some unidentified Jack Oleg scripts at Marvel and a few others in other places at Fawcett, stuff like that. So if he had the time and he wanted to go over the monster stories, trying to figure out who wrote what, not an easy feat, easy feat, of course. But yeah, I think that the guy for Ditko, before Stan started signing the stories, which means that he was writing the scripts over Ditko's art, as he did in Spider-Man. But before that, Ditko stories didn't have a writer. They just said S. Ditko. But Ditko is not known for scripting. So I think it was Joe Gill who wrote his Fawcett science fiction stories.
But Ditko was plotting them, right?
Yes, of course he was. Of course he was. But he usually was. He would draw a story, and somebody else would add the dialogue, and that was a regular MO throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Yeah. So that's how we know that Ditko is not a scripter normally. So I think it's possible that Joe Gill, that those stories were given to Marvel completely done. Here's the script by Joe Gill and the complete art by Steve Ditko, and Joe Rosen just had to letter, and Stan Goldberg just had to color. But other guys, the guy on the blog talking about Larry Lieber said that Stan would tell that Kirby would most likely tell Stan what the story was going to be, and then he would pass it on to Don Heck. And I don't really understand why even Jack would do that.
Yeah.
If Jack had an idea for a story, he would write himself.
Right.
So the Don Heck stories and the Joe Sina stories, they were written by somebody else. Mm-hmm. We just don't know who.
All right. Well, we could leave it there for the week. We'll talk more about it next week.
Or not.
Or not. You never know.
We'll never know. Maybe some of us will have a flat tire, and we'll go back to discussing
flat tire. How to plug a tire. How to change a tire. Which is easier. All right. So you guys out there have a good night.
Mm-hmm. Take care, everybody.
Right.
We'll catch you all next time. Hold on. Do we want thumbs up? Let's get some. How about peace sign? Come on. There we go. There's some confetti for us to end on. All right. Have a good one. Happy Thanksgiving.